Hi, and welcome everyone to my Venus series. Down below there will be a link to my book, of course, and as well as skipping towards the actual sign that I'm going to be talking about if you don't want to listen to this beginning segment, which I am going to go in a little bit deeper than what I think a lot of astrologers out there on YouTube are going to be tapping into. There's going to be a little bit more counseling based interwoven in the beginning section of what Venus is, as well as how can we kind of redefine the culture in at least the Western world. I don't know about anywhere else, as it is kind of blah, and I think we need a little bit of a cultural change. What are our belief systems when it comes to dating and getting somebody to fall in love with us, because you can't actually get someone to fall in love with you or anything like that necessarily. So depending on who you, the viewer, are, because I don't actually know who you are and what you struggle with, I'm going to tap in a little bit with a little bit more counseling in there, since I do have a master's in mental health counseling and I love relationships, as I am a Libra rising, Libra South Node in the first house. So this is my book. You can get it on Amazon. The link will be down below. It's also in the description box in my channel description page. It is like a personal story. You can learn a lot about it, or learn something about it from reading. Of course, you're going to learn about it if you read it. But if you like relationships, learning from heartbreak, learning from different encounters, how we deal with one another, because that is all Venusian, Venus energy is relationships, self-value, self-worth, and money. What do we attract? And so if you read that book, it's not going to solve your problems or anything like that, but you might feel heard. There might be something in there that may relate to you or someone that you feel close to, as well as kind of learning how to empathize and be more compassionate of other people as well as yourself, because if you want the world to be a better place, then you have to understand that nobody is exactly like you, and that's a good thing, because otherwise the world would be really boring, and each individual brings their own authentic, creative, cool, weird person, whatever, to the mix, so we all can learn and grow. Some other books, because I'm just going to be this type of person, even though I'm not the writer of these books. But if you haven't already heard of or read these books before, these can be things that you can learn from if you're struggling in relationships, or just, you're on a self-help journey, self-improvement journey, self-awareness journey. If you've just kind of started and astrology was just appealing to you, that is one way of doing it. These are other books that I just grabbed off of my bookshelf, and so if you haven't heard of the 5 love languages, it's very popular. If you haven't read it already, I think there is a part 2. Reading this, getting the examples of what the writer, Gary Chapman, I'm always bad with names, basically, we have 5 love languages. You can say in astrology, the Venus signs in the 12 zodiac signs are 12 zodiac love languages. It's just a little bit different in how we kind of interpret it, or another level of stuff. So words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, physical touch, and everyone has, their kind of go-to with that. If you haven't read that, this one I haven't read in a long time, so it's, it's a very short read, but why Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am by John Powell. I have to do it like this. But if that is interesting to you, I'm going to try and link them down below so it's easy access. So yeah, but that's a good, very fast, easy read. I've read it one time. It probably was common sense to me, so I don't remember it as much. This was one of the first books I was suggested from somebody during my terrible relationship, which is in here. The biggest lesson of my entire life was that relationship that really woke me up to what the hell I was doing also. Even though I wasn't doing anything necessarily bad or wrong, I was self-defeating in an unconscious sense, and so realizing, maybe you'll figure this out during the bubble time of your first Saturn return, which that was happening to me, as well as the Pluto in Capricorn transit, which I have a stellium in Capricorn in my 4th house. It's a very emotional house of emotions and family trauma. The foundations of childhood is in the 4th house. So it made me really unravel, and all this stuff kind of brought up to the surface. So maybe, in a creative way of how I wrote the book through stories, maybe you can come up, or certain things will light up in your head, if you read it. Someone had suggested this book to me, Get Out of Your Own Way, which for me, it made me realize 70% of this book was my partner at the time, not necessarily me. And it was making me very angry and got me in my critical Virgo in 12th house mode of criticizing and trying to get somebody else to fit what I wanted, which you can't do. You can't do it. You can't force anyone who's not ready to fit in your mold. You can't do it, even though you have an ideal picture of we're going to be the perfect couple, or we get along so well, or it just flows, but there's so much more to relationships than it just kind of just going with the flow and expecting it to work out in the long run. You can be attracted to each other in the beginning. It can be fun. You can busy yourself with all the entertainment stuff, which is, the dating, the Leo 5th house stuff. But at some point, someone, needs to be able to speak up and talk about some serious stuff, or be able to do that in the first place, early on. And that takes a lot of self-worth, self-knowing. Do you even know who in the world are you? Who are you? What you like, what you don't like, what can you tolerate, what can you not tolerate, what are deal breakers? Even if the person looks the way that you're attracted to, or has the perfect resume, has a job that is very secure, and they can take care of themselves, or they can take care of themselves and you, and you're like, oh, I need to be with this person. I'm going to morph myself in order to fit the mold of the person that I like, even though that is not authentic to myself. Later on down the road, if you are not authentic to yourself and what you truly wanted, even though you were disillusioned in the beginning by the romance and the entertainment and what could be, you might end up feeling kind of sad and lonely, or this is not what I want. And then, you run into problems, or things get more complicated after you already get married or you have kids, and it's a lot harder, So changing the culture of, how we approach relationships and making that more of a popular norm. That's the cool thing to do. That is just what people they tend to do that now, instead of the old way, swiping 1 million times on a dating app and kind of looking down the resume list and their little picture and saying, no, yes, so quickly, and overriding so many other things, can really make you miss out on really good relationships. Or not even trying. And then we all become more separate and more alone and more victim mentality and blah, blah, blah. So I wrote down, a bunch of stuff about what Venus kind of rules, because I tend to kind of go all over the place. Usually in past videos, I do that, or I blank out because I have Chiron and Gemini, and I'm always a work in progress with my Chiron and Saturn. And I have a playlist down below on my channel. If you click my name down below, you'll see a list of videos, shorts, playlists, lives, blah, blah, blah. And you can click on playlists, and it's whatever I have put up so far is organized there if you want to check out other videos to help you. Otherwise, why am I doing this? I'll just help myself. I'm not going to help you. I don't know who you are, but I love doing this. I do it anyway at work, with my coworkers. They come to me for advice all the time, or I notice things about them that they need to work on, and sometimes they're not always ready or completely aware to work on their things, and that's fine. I see them all as my little children, even though a lot of them are older than me, or some people, I don't know, whatever. So basically, Venus rules charm and magnetism, just kind of what naturally kind of gravitates towards you, as well as what you may be giving off to other people. Remember that Venus, if you're new to astrology, Venus rules 2 zodiac signs. It is the ruler of Taurus, which mainly rules our self-worth, our self-value, and our personal finances, as well as Venus rules Libra. Libra is the relationship house. It rules other people, because you're not thinking about yourself anymore when you're in a relationship. You're kind of thinking about yourself too, but if you want a relationship that is harmonious, you do have to consider the other person. Otherwise, why are you in a relationship with another person? Just be in a relationship with yourself, So in order to create a harmonious relationship, I forgot what I'm talking about. See, this happens to me all the time. In order to create a harmonious relationship, you have to be what Libra stuff, diplomatic, kind of know when to kind of back off and not be so assertive. Sometimes there's someone who is going to get their way, and there's going to be someone who might not get their way as much at times, but hopefully it's to a point where it's not a deal breaker, or it's not damaging their relationship or hurting one another. It's just sometimes, things are going to favor someone else. Like if one partner loves football and the other person hates football, and they love going to the museum and vice versa, they're going to share in, I don't know if they will share, but hopefully you're going to kind of compromise and say, like, I know that you love football, even though I don't really care about football, and I will go, to the games or whatever because you love it. But I would appreciate it if you didn't have football playing 24 hours a day. Like sometimes I want to watch my shows too, if you're able to take a break, or whatever the two parties, or multiple. Some people are polyamorous, or do very unconventional things. If you're able to be upfront, honest, and vulnerable with what you actually want and what are you willing to work with, it might be hard because you're gonna be weeding out a lot of people who don't fit that box, but if you know for certain this is what you like and don't like, who you are, and you've kind of gone through a lot of tests already or relationships to figure that out, or give it a try at least, then you won't know. I always forget what. Venus also rules our aesthetic taste. What is our style, interest in art, beauty, personal aesthetics of a person. Like Venus in Aries is going to most likely like someone who they have an attractive body that kind of looks sporty, for an example. Venus also rules our romantic desire, or the kind of partners we tend to gravitate to. Venus is pleasure. Taurus is all about pleasure seeking. Food is pleasurable. Anyone out there with binge eating disorder or go to food for comfort. I know I am one person in there. You'll read that a little bit in the book. It's very diverse, from a ballet background. Touch, feeling, leisure activities, sensual delights, the senses. Smell. Does the person always wear cologne, or does that turn you off? Or, all kinds of stuff. Physical touch. Some people like, a little bit chubby kind of person because it's, they're more huggable. And some people aesthetically, maybe the more super toned and maybe bony-ish people, maybe that's how they find themselves attractive, but maybe a partner will be like, it's too masculine for me, like on a female, or she doesn't look healthy, whatever. The eye, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It is our social grace. This is very like Libra, you have to be kind of charming and pleasant, and the tone of voice that you use or the way that you say things, it's not like super mean or critical or angry. It's kind of like icky to the kind of Venus energy. How are we diplomatic with other people and respectful? Think hospitality stuff like hotels, restaurants. These are people who, even if they do not like the way the customer or the person is approaching them and talking to them, or like, why are you yelling at me? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just a freaking receptionist. I'm the person on the phone, and you're lashing out at me and I didn't even do anything wrong. They still have to have the strength and calm demeanor to be very, try to like ease things down, de-escalate a very unpleasant, energy that is being encountered, and try to calm them down. Like, I'm going to try and solve your problems. It's okay. What is going on? Let me see what I can do for you. Okay. That is very Taurus, Libra, Venusian energy, dealing, de-escalating and rebalancing, unpleasant situations. That is Venus. Our Venus is also our affection style, our like physical wants and needs, as well as possibly ourselves, the verbal ways that we express, and how we show love, or how we want love to be received, as well as how we tend to give it. Venus also rules money and resources. That's why Venus is like a very important planet, because it rules kind of a lot of stuff. In order to have nice things or go on nice dates and have, cashmere sweaters and cologne and perfume and cute outfits to look a certain way, or makeup, and be able to afford a haircut and all this stuff, like you usually have to have money, and in our society, we kind of revolve around currency, even though at the end of the day, if money didn't exist, the main things we need to kind of look out for is water, food, shelter, medication, and possibly armory or like self-defense things. If the world is still a crazy cuckoo bird of people who don't know how to live harmoniously with each other, then you're going to need that. or you're going to still need that, or you're going to have to self-defense yourself against a really hungry tiger who wants to eat you instead of a deer or something like that. So yeah. So Venus is also like how we attract money and resources from other people as well as our spending habits, how we tend to spend money on things, or are you an impulse shopper, wants and needs. When I hear from people who are like, oh, I need this. And I'm like, you need that? You definitely do not need a $300 Labubu, okay? You don't need that. You want that. There's a difference. Venus rules our value system. What do you actually value? And when people, get into, I don't think people get into discussions about this, but you can get into a debate about what is actually valuable, what is valuable to you, because that is going to be different for people. So those are things that you have to dig into when you are exploring somebody new, as well as, are they being honest? Do they actually do what they say? Do they actually value what they're saying, or they're just trying to pull one over you, or trying to people please in order for you to like them, and all these things? You have to use a lot of discernment. But what do you value? Because if you don't even know what you value, you're more likely to respond in a way to be like, oh, yeah, I think, I value that, I guess, yeah, it's the same. But you might not have thought about it that deeply, or you're just going along with it because it just sounds good. And that is something that you have to really learn how to ask the right questions, because if you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the answer, and that might come with, how long have you lived? What kind of experiences have you already gone through to now? Now your value system has changed. And now, after all the crap that you've been through in the past, you are now going to ask certain things earlier on to prevent devaluing yourself, because if you love yourself, why would you keep entertaining someone that makes you feel bad or hurts you, or your alignment on how you spend money or your lifestyle just doesn't align, and no matter what you do or try and tell the person like, hey, whatever you keep doing hurts me, you knew, if you discuss this, you already knew that's how they were before. And if that keeps hurting you, and they don't want to change at all, they love living and spending that way, even if it seems kind of reckless or irresponsible or whatever, you might not be the best match. You're going to keep fighting, or one person is always going to feel hurt, like, oh, you make me feel really, you spend like this and it makes me so stressed. We don't have that. We don't have like millions and millions of dollars to do things like that. And the other person will, well, you might die tomorrow, so I'm going to spend the entire check, in one day, because why not? And money is always going to come back. So your belief systems and philosophies about how money is spent is just different, and so if you know that, no matter how attractive you are, how they make you feel, and the lifestyle they may give to you or whatever, if you're not willing to sacrifice or whatever it is, you're going to end up being hurt. And so why do you keep doing that to yourself if that's not a part of your value system, and if you're holding on to something like that, that says something about yourself as to why are you holding on to someone like that if something negative. I can't explain all the situations out there, and it depends, so why would you keep hurting yourself or putting yourself in a situation that devalues yourself? And if it hurts you, unless maybe you're a little bit too full of it and you do need to be dropped down a peg. Possibly, maybe it's unrealistic. You have perfectionistic ideals, in other people, and you have to kind of succumb a little bit lower to what your standards are because it's just unrealistic, and you might as well, buy a robot that looks exactly like you or the way you want it to be and programmed exactly the way you want it to. And hopefully that just does it for you, makes it happy. We're probably in a time period where you can do that, at least in the future. But I don't know how authentically happy you're going to be, in the long run, at least. Let's see. Venus also rules our relationship pacing, like how fast, slow, or balanced, it's going to be like a Venus in Aries is going to be so fast. I like you. I hope you like me, and we're going to make it work. And it's like instantaneous. Venus in Capricorn might be like a slow burn, it's a slow growth, slow burn. Do I trust you in order to open up? Do you seem like a stable and secure person who can provide for yourself or provide for the relationship too, or whatever? They're going to play out a little bit differently. Romantic ideals like fairy tale, like Pisces, or very pragmatic, like a Virgo. Artistic expression is Venus. Our magnetism for love and wealth. Our collaborative energy, because Libra is collaboration with another person who is not yourself. How do you do that? Your seduction style, like a Venus in Scorpio is going to be very deep, almost like intrusive, wants to get into your psychological psyche, which, maybe like a Venus in Leo or someone who has a ton of Leo might be like, this is too much. We need to stay on the surface. We don't go to that uncomfortable depths of my childhood trauma, and I just don't want to go there. It is crazy. I want to avoid it. And Venus in Scorpio is like, I want to know everything about you and the skeletons in your closet, and why are you the way that you are? And that can be very uncomfortable to people. Like, whoa, like who invited you to do that to me? Venus in Scorpio people might attract like sexual encounters, and like they didn't like, do I have an invisible sign around my neck saying my body is for you? I don't want you to be around, go away, so that is also like what are we attracting, or Venus is, I'm using Venus in Scorpio because I have Venus in Scorpio. It may attract mental health disordered people, and you're like, what? God, why do I like these messed up people? And so learning how to discern what kind of messed up people can you handle in a healthy way that doesn't make you go down in a negative spiral. You can read that in my book, through my psychosis experience. So, Venus is also your self-worth, self-love. Do you love yourself? Why would you do that to yourself if you loved yourself? There's like a basic question you can ask. It's the cultural influences, because like in different cultures, there's certain ways that we may learn to express love and respect. Things that you do and don't do, because that's just part of the culture of what, creates harmony. And so in certain cultures, like, westernized cultures might need to learn a little bit more from really old, very rich cultures that had been around for a really long time, and try and implement the practices that may work for them. Maybe it'll work for you, maybe not, but something to look into, I guess. That's why international travel has benefits if you're able to branch off into, a culture that is really, really not yours, whatever you're willing or able to do. Venus is like our relational wounds, like how we interact with each other, because we don't always have the same Venus. Within your age group, you're probably going to have the same Venus sign as your peers. So you're going to mirror back, that kind of Venus energy, or, other aspects as well, like your North Node, South Node, your Saturn sits in there for a while, things like that. So you're going to have similarities in your little small age bubble or your generation. But when you branch out to people who are older and younger than you, their ways of showing and expressing love, or what they believe is attractive, is going to be different. So yeah, and then Venus is our love language, like affirmations, physical touch, gifts, acts of service, quality time. And Venus can be like a projection mirror, which all of us tend to be a projection of each other in our shadow self, our unconscious self. When people say, oh, I'm working on my shadow, that is no longer a shadow. You're conscious of what that is, so you can now work on it. Shadow is something that is like almost in the 12th house. The lights are off. It's not easily accessible. You're not aware of it. So if you're not aware of it, how can you consciously work on it? It's unconscious. Okay. Kind of going off onto another segment. This intro is going to be really long. So Venus can be like the economics of love, how we exchange energy, time, money, and attention in relationships. So maybe it starts off really good in the beginning, but over time, if you don't work on it, if you don't water the area that you want it to grow like a plant, or nurturing like a cute little puppy. I'm about to get another puppy. So cute. If you don't, nurture, the relationship or whatever, it's going to die. Like the living plant, if you don't water it, it's going to freaking die. You have to kind of always tend to it. And if you're not ready to do that, you're still working on yourself, it might not be the best time to get into a serious relationship. And hopefully, if you want a non-serious relationship, that you communicate that to the other person, because that's bad karma, okay? Venus is also like a boundary setter, because it's your value. It's like, I will not tolerate that, and I'm going to communicate that to you when it feels hurtful, or you're overstepping, someone's overstepping, almost like sexual harassment or rape, or anything like that. That like, no, you're not allowed to do that. I don't trust you. I don't know you. Well, you don't just have access to me because you bought me a coffee and now you get access to my body. Does that value add up? That doesn't make any sense, right? But there are people out there who is like, well, I bought you a meal, so, you should put out. You're like, no, so no matter what the belief systems are, there are boundaries, and some people don't know how to communicate their boundaries firmly. And there are people who do not listen and hear the other person when they're speaking their boundaries. They're like, oh no, they didn't mean it like that. They're just playing hard to get, and that's when things get really complicated, blurry, toxic, and you're diving into a really bad situation for all parties. Venus also shows how we feel desired, everybody, some people will love it if you give gifts and being spoiled, and some people will be like, I really don't care, like it's just a lot of stuff, and they don't care about material stuff. They care about quality time and learning from each other or doing other types of things. Venus is not just love, it's diplomacy. So it's like, how do you reciprocate, negotiate, compromise, and balance the needs of the people who are involved? Venus is our attraction field. I already mentioned this with like what you tend to attract. Venus is the shadow side of, like the shadow side of Venus can be vanity, entitlement, manipulation in love in order to get what we want, or using charm kind of as a weapon. You can even do, people do that even in non-romantic relationships. They do that in business, marketing, in order to like lure a person into buying their product, or choosing their service or company, like, oh, blah blah blah, or how they word things, to kind of make things blurry, or kind of woo someone in order to spend their money. It's that, positive or negative, it really depends on the person. Venus can be like a glue that keeps people together in a positive or a negative way. That is beyond passion. It's shared tastes, values, humor, lifestyles. And if the persons were not authentic in the beginning, they kind of lied, or just like, oh yeah, I can do that, but in the long run, they hate it, or they want to roll their eyeballs, like, oh, again, then why did you say that you liked it, in the beginning, so you could just get the person, but you don't like it. Just say like, it's okay, like I don't mind, doing that activity or whatever, going with you to that, but it's not something that I want to do all the time, just verbalize it, and hopefully the other person is respectful enough to understand, and you work it out. It's not like, but that's not fair, if you love me you should always do what I want, otherwise you don't love me enough, like that's not very loving, actually. That's like controlling. Venus and the body, Venus kind of also shows what kind of aura, physical body type, personality that the person kind of gives off, even though they are not that actual zodiac sign that you like, or just like the energy of it, maybe like a hint of what that person's Venus type they are drawn to, as well as in a synastry chart. Where are all these planets, entering in the other person's houses? It's kind of create, this like, what kind of energy are the two encountering together? So as a cultural change, lessons that Venus can teach us is like shifting from transaction type of relationships into reciprocity, blah, you know what I'm talking about. So like dating apps out there, the online dating may have made it a little bit more transactional. You read the short pamphlet and the little picture, of the person that you want to swipe, and if they don't match all these things, the height, the type of job title, blah, 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 then it's a no. You're going to bypass them instead of letting things naturally flow organically, whatever works for you. Because I know it's not as easy to meet new people out there, as in the old times, even though I'm not that kind of old. But yeah, it's, shifting our mentality of how strict are we getting, or how unrealistic are we really, when doing that. We might be omitting people in the beginning, or trusting what they put on the front page. But when it comes to their behaviors, follow through, how they communicate, you don't really see that, on that page, so then it'll just delete it, and then people get sick of it over time. Rediscover courtship, slowing down, savoring connection, not giving yourself away so quickly, putting yourself out and open, creating that tension that like you can't have easy access to this person so fast, kind of makes them maybe want to work harder for you if they're serious. And if they're not that serious, then that's already an answer. Or if they're not willing to respect, your boundaries or what hurts you and all that stuff, that's already an answer. Just leave it be. Like they've already omitted themselves if they, cross themselves off of your value system of yourself and what you believe in. So you can kind of, work with that based on your own personal value system. Value self-worth. So, in a cultural way, we should learn to value ourselves more first, instead of just kind of putting yourself last in order to desperately seek a relationship. If you don't have strong self-worth, self-esteem, and self-value, you're more likely to put yourself lower on your list and put someone higher who you don't even know, or give them excuses and allow them to take advantage of you. And when you do that in the beginning, you've already taught them how to treat you, and they're going to keep doing it because you didn't seem to have a problem with it earlier on. So, okay. So, learning to value yourself first, really knowing what hurts you, what you really don't mind, and that is being connected with yourself, your feelings, your emotions, because you can't really say what hurts one person hurts another, and being like a free-spirited floater that changes partners every day, be like, really doesn't bother me. Like if they feel a connection, they're just going to go with it. And when the connection kind of fades and it dies, then they don't have a strong emotional attachment and they can move on. It doesn't hurt them. But to the receiver, that can be extremely painful and hurtful, and they don't operate that way. They, are devoted to one person. They want to work on it, grow, and hold on to it for like forever. And being left out in the cold, ghosted, stonewalled, gaslighted, whatever the vocabulary word that's not nice is thrown in there, that can really devastate that person. So communication in the beginning and being realistic with how you approach this in the beginning is preventing unnecessary heartbreak earlier rather than later, when you're emotionally attached, especially females who get more emotionally attached faster. Culturally, like normalizing pleasure in healthy ways, so stronger boundaries, stronger self-control. If you're a male, practicing celibacy or self-control actually makes you a better performer in the bedroom, just so you know, because you were able to hold yourself for a longer period of time, so you can make the bedroom pleasures longer instead of, oh, I'm done. That lasted like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and your female partner, if you are, what is the word? Male and female partnered up, she's gonna be like, what? That's it? So it's not going to be as enjoyable for her. And then you're like, well, I'm done. I already did the thing. So when you practice self-control and you're not watching porn all the time, stimulating yourself in that way, you're learning self-control. You can go out in society and being around a lot of really attractive people, and you can still control yourself. Then you're able to perform even better for your real lover, who's going to devote their whole life to you and actually make your life better. instead of running away from them or seeking attention and validation from other people who is not that person. And then the relationship starts going down. And it's like, well, what happened? You were lovey-dovey with each other in the beginning. What happened? You no longer worked on it. That's what happened. You abandoned the relationship, and then you created distance and a toxic relationship and hurt. And now this, if we were talking about women, you cheated on her or whatever, of course she's gonna now go off and heal, become more of an independent woman, go buy a house on her own, go do all these things, on her own. That's why we see this cultural shift of very empowered women who can do everything. So it makes men feel like, well, what am I good for now? So men have to kind of catch up and kind of reorganize what they're doing or what they're not doing that is kind of putting them in this cycle of, self-defeat, because the women want you, okay? They want a protector and they want a provider, At the end of the day, I believe that women do want a provider. They want to provide for themselves, probably out of safety, because if the man ends up abandoning them and they're left with the kid or whatever, and they have to really rely on the baby daddy for child support, and they start doing all kinds of manipulative stuff to avoid paying child support, the woman, she has to keep feeding the kids, or she wants to take care of herself and stuff. And so you see a rise in independent women and men just kind of plateauing, So there's this kind of, we need to reorganize the culture of how relationships work, and that will take time, but hopefully it can progress in a positive way. Let's see. Venus culture can celebrate diverse love styles. So like the 12 zodiac signs, there's like 12 love languages in this aspect, not just one. So just understanding that not everybody loves the same way that you do. And if you want to be with someone else, if you want a companionship for life, a best friend for life that you can share and grow and do the bedroom deeds with, more easily accessibly, then you have to learn the other person's love language. Otherwise, don't be in a relationship. Get a pet parrot or something like that. Way easier. Reframe beauty standards. How we see beauty. Not everyone sees beauty as the influencer online who has a certain kind of look, certain kind of body, surgery, and all this stuff, or certain kind of dress style. Sometimes people see that's like, okay, that's nice, but I want beauty is even deeper than that, beyond the surface part. And that's going to be different for everyone. And then culturally with Venus, how do we honor relationships as an art form? Because it always changes. It's like art, it's not, relationships are not an Excel spreadsheet, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. And it's that simple. It's just not, it's harder. Same when I train clients with personal training in the gym. When somebody does a squat, if I have 10 people doing a squat in the beginner's level, sure, they're doing a squat, but they're all doing a squat kind of differently. And I have to make adjustments of why do they feel it like this? Why do they feel pain here? What is a weak point? Why are their knees buckling in? They're rolling on their toes instead of on the back half and outside portions of their feet. They're leaning too far forward. Their abs are weak. That's why they do that, even though they try so hard. There are other things that we have to work on in order to get that squat to be more efficient and effective to add weight, So everyone does things a little bit differently, and sometimes it's not the person's fault. That is the way it is right now based on whatever happened to them in the past, or they learned incorrectly, or they didn't think of it that way. They didn't think of it that deeply because it's just a squat. It's like, come on, but there's way more to it, and so it's just like, how do we broaden our brain and belief systems of relationships are like an art, and that is very hard because everyone is different, so it's really hard, and it can be kind of scary to work with someone else because people are afraid of rejection. They want to be liked and all this stuff. Not everyone has looks going for them. Some people are not everyone is funny or charming. Not everyone has the words to entertain or express themselves. It's just everyone has their own struggles. That's why knowing your Chiron and your Saturn placement are really important. Knowing your ascendant sign, which, puts the order of your whole chart in order, or blah, blah, is, it helps. All these things can help you understand yourself a little bit better. Encouraging vulnerability as a culture, because if you're able to express yourself without the fear of rejection or being ridiculed, bullied, embarrassed, publicly humiliated, all this stuff, if you have the courage and bravery to learn to do that, even if it's like a little bit at a time, because it doesn't feel secure. It feels very nerve-wracking, and you want to protect your ego of like, I'm the best and I'm not going to show the negative sides of myself because I don't want this person that I like to know all the bad stuff about myself, because that will turn the person off, and yeah, that's valid, but if you're more authentic, you're going to receive a person who's going to understand and be more compassionate and work with you if that is what they're willing to do, or they'll also expose themselves and be like, you're a piece of shit, that's not what I want. And thank God you found that out in the beginning instead of later, and so like they're right now telling you how they behave, how emotionally stable they are, how they're going to treat you, or what their beliefs are. And if that makes you feel bad, makes you feel lower, that might not be the most supportive partner to get stuck with, at least not at this phase of life that you're in, because I don't know how old you are, and hopefully you grow and evolve. But if you have someone kind of putting you down like that all the time, making you feel like shit about yourself, you are less likely to grow, get better, and evolve with someone breathing fire down your neck, and depending how they do it, because sometimes you need, constructive criticism, which doesn't feel good, in order to grow. But if the person authentically cares about you, like the intentions are true and loving, and it's like, I'm saying that not to be mean to you, I'm saying it because I care. And I don't think you're quite aware of it, but you're doing this again, and if it's something that you want to work on, you're like, yeah, I do that. Like, do you want it to be better, or this is something you're not ready for right now? Like, you're not in the mood, the mindset, a lot of crap is happening in your life right now to add another thing of suckiness to your life. Maybe it's not the right time, and that person is going to show you who they are in the beginning. And so, it can be like, oh, wow, like, I'm glad I opened up and expressed something vulnerable, because I wouldn't have known that this person is going to actually have my back, you know, and help me as a person, you know, like your growth partner for life, your best friend, your companion, someone that you can come home to when you don't trust the other people out there in the scary world. But this person is going to we're going to kind of understand, as long as you are also willing to work on the relationship and be honest. Are you actually going to work on your flaws and whatever? Because if you don't work on your part, if you keep making excuses over and over again, if you don't change the way that you're communicating to your partner that you want to change, and it keeps dragging on and on and on, that other person who is so supportive and patient for you, they're eventually going to leave you, because, you know, it's starting to be a drag or become really draining. It's putting them down. It's making them change who they used to be, and they used to love themselves, and now you brought them lower, you know, in order to match your level of self-esteem and self-worth, instead of you trying to rise up to their standard of self-worth and self-esteem, you know, and being patient enough for you to get there. And they had to come down to kind of help you keep coming up, you know, while they still maintain and hopefully still also grow. So it's like a dance or a balance of the two. And that's going to determine, is the relationship going to work in the long run or not, you know? So, and no one can really determine that besides the two people in the relationship. Even if you go outside of the relationship to ask for advice, make sure you talk to the actual person that you're in the relationship, what's going on, not all these other people who have no idea what's really going on or how the other person feels in your relationship on how you need to approach the relationship. You need to just talk to the person you're in the relationship with, because that is just insane. Venus in a cultural change way, integrate money and love with awareness, because Venus rules money, and we know a lot of couples, they fight about money all the time. How do you spend money? When you make a big purchase, do you communicate and talk to each other about it? Or you're like, I'm the one who made the money, so I don't care about what you think or whatever. We're going to buy the couch like this, or we're going to decorate the house my way because that's the way I want it to be. That's not very loving. You have to coexist with someone else who has to also enjoy the environment. You have to come to an agreement. And what your value is on a house, if you are going to buy a house, you know, what size, how big or small, is it realistic? Does that leave room for your lifestyle, travel, education, activities, entertainment, or are you going to be house broke? You know, how do you allocate, you know, extra savings? You know, what makes you both feel safe and secure? Does anyone have spending habits, shopaholism, gambling, addictions that will take away from the home team, so to say, because eventually that's going to hurt the partner, you know? And if you're not honest, you get like sneaky behavior. Someone opens a new credit card under their name to, you know, hide statements from the other. Yeah. Or participating in like wife exchange clubs when they never told you that after like being married for 10 years, and it's like a huge surprise, and you trusted the person the entire time, and this was a huge slap in the face. Or you allocated money to your kids' college funds, and after 20 years of being married, you never even thought to check all the time, and you just trusted, because why would you be in a relationship that you don't trust? And you realize that all the money is gone, you know, for your kids, and you put money towards that as well. And now what happened? You know, like all of these crazy things happen to people. And, you know, it is not fun and it's really hard. And if you have ever gone through something like that, I really empathize with you. It's not like I can solve your problems or anything like that, but I am aware that shit happens. So that's why I like to promote a cultural change in how we approach relationships earlier on to prevent unnecessary torment, later on, and that is my 1 hour, oh my God, intro. So the next segment is to the zodiac signs, Venus and through the signs. So catch you later. My name is Natasha. Please like and subscribe if you find my videos, my very long videos, informative. Okay, bye. Okay, Venus and Virgo for the longer video. Nemo is now 13 weeks old, and he was very feisty and wiggly in the short version of this video. It's going to be similar to that. Maybe I will have extra to elaborate on, maybe. Nemo. So enjoy what he's doing right now, because I'm going to put him down soon because he wants to play with his sister. So when I think about Venus and Virgo, it is the wannabe perfectionist. You attract work or you kind of ooze this kind of, you're trying to seek perfection, whether that is with your physical body, how you present yourself, how you come off. Are you polite and courteous and respectful, and you're willing to help? Sometimes maybe you're unrealistic with your search of finding the perfect ideal partner, because that is not realistic. And Virgo is a real realist too. This is the real world. This is not fantasy. This is not dream la la land. This is not marry your Prince Charming, or you're saving some damsel in distress. You're like a realist, so when you think about a partner or a future partner, maybe so many things kind of come up for you to where, like, is this going to work? Is this going to work in the long term? Is this person a bum? I can't deal with a bum. Or are they going to drag me down? Because Venus and Virgo, any kind of Virgo placement is like one of the workaholics of the zodiac, and they care a lot and they do want to help, but there's only so much that one human being can kind of give and do, so they can't really be with a bum. They have to be with someone who is intelligent to some extent, to be able to manage kind of their own stuff. So this way, the Venus and Virgo person doesn't have to compensate or overcompensate in order to help another person, because that is even more work than the work that they already have for themselves, or what they want to do for themselves or get done and completed. If they don't come off as this kind of businessy type of workaholic, they are doing some kind of work. Maybe they're working out all the time because they care about health a lot. Virgo is the sign of health, depending on whatever health activity that you choose. They do care about sexual health as well. So they're going to be, pleasing in the bedroom, or wanting to please in the bedroom, or they care about what do you want, what feels good, and all this stuff. And they expect that you do the same for them, so it's almost like not like it's almost may seem conditional. Like, I did all this for you, so you need to do all this for me too. They kind of expect that. So over time, it might almost seem like more work, instead of just unconditional love. So just be kind of cautious of that. I forgot to mention in this video that Venus is in fall in Virgo. It does not do that well here because it's natural. Venus naturally likes to be in Taurus and Libra. And Venus in Pisces, or just Pisces energy in general, is unconditional love. Like, love everybody, love everyone for their flaws and all, their imperfections, their perfections. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and it's all beautiful. It's all part of life, and that is like Pisces love. But Virgo is the opposite of Pisces, and Virgo kind of zooms in, so close to where it's like you have a flaw right there, like this dot, like the dot on your face is bothering me so much. May I pop it for you or something like that, or your hair is sticking, it's not freaking glued back, to where there's no little phrase in the way. It needs to be glued back and perfect, or whatever the perfect is. If you're going to go walk outside, you need to be professional and presentable at all times. Otherwise, it just doesn't look good. Like, why would you do that? So a Venus in Virgo can come off as a little bit too critical, or a little demanding, or kind of pushy. And, from their side, they may, mean well. Like, why wouldn't you want to look good? Or why wouldn't you want to look presentable and professional? You never know when you're going to meet someone or encounter like a business client or something out in the real world. So you always need to look professional and presentable, not like a lazy bum or whatever. At least look put together. That might be the mindset, or, something that is the Venus in Virgo is drawn to, is someone who does care about their appearance or how they come off, the way they speak. Are they polite? Do they come off as classy? They may be like, if it's a male Venus in Virgo, they may kind of like this kind of ideal of a secretary, a personal assistant, especially in like the old times, 40s, 50s, where the women in the movies, they wear their makeup to bed, and they wait until their husband falls asleep, and then they go to the bathroom and take it all off and undo all of or redo all of the curls and stuff like that, and put up all their creams and stuff in order to look nice and buttery smooth. And then they go to sleep, and then they make sure they wake up before their husband and put up all their makeup or whatever, and then pretend they went back to sleep and pretended that they woke up just completely perfect. That's kind of the unrealistic mindset that perhaps a Venus in Virgo. I do not have Venus in Virgo, but that level of perfectionism, which is just, especially in today's world, is just not realistic, and a Venus in Virgo person has to be kind of cautious and mindful as, with how you verbalize your critiques to the people that you care about, because you may come off as overly critical, or maybe you're starting to shame the person, and people take shaming differently. So people who are shamed too much, or they feel like beat down, or you told them over and over and over and over again, and they're just obviously aren't changing, or they're starting to ignore you, or just like roll their eyes, or like feel kind of depressed, like they're never good enough for you, or they can't do anything right, they may start getting kind of depressed and even less motivated to actually make the changes that you are criticizing them upon. So you can be kind of self-sabotaging to maybe yourself or the partner that you see this kind of ideal perfectionism in, or they were at some point. And over time, if you nitpick at them a little bit too much, then those emotions and behaviors and how they love you starts to change, and it becomes like work, or this is like a business contract where they need to look, behave, or do certain things because it's part of their job to do it. Maybe you have like a very strict prenup or something if you're in a relationship with a billionaire, for example, and that is in the contract that you need to look this way, otherwise you're not going to get any of my funding or whatever, some kind of extreme thing, because that does exist. But that can be a Venus in Virgo trait. Doesn't have to be, but it's this kind of unrealistic perfectionism that they expect or they want from a partner. And depending on that partner's what they're willing to do, what they've kind of committed themselves to, whether it's they unconditionally love you no matter how much you criticize them, or they're being in a relationship with you because you have a lot of money, or the sex is really good, or you just look good together, and they just have this kind of dream fantasy that hasn't popped yet. Just be mindful of that. Forgot where I was going to go with this, but Venus in Virgo really cares, really wants to help. Maybe may come off as uncommittal because they're always searching for that perfect partner. And so, especially if you have any kind of Libra placements, which kind of seems like indecisive or can't ever decide, because there's that fear of like, oh my God, if I actually commit to this or this person and they seem perfect, but if it ends up not being perfect, part of them is like, well, you shouldn't get divorced, or, now I have to actually deal with the person if they actually, do they keep working, or are they going to just relax and become a lazy bum? Because I always do the work, the Venus and Virgo person is always willing to do work and work a lot. And so they don't want to be with someone who gets kind of lazy, because they're not willing to get lazy, So there might be fears there, and that depends on you, the person, or whoever, if you know someone with Venus and Virgo. But they are very helpful, very kind, and giving, but then there is this kind of, sometimes this conditional energy to them, because they expect it back, because they want to be cared and nurtured too, because they're always willing to put in the work for other people. Doesn't always have to be mean money wise, but it's just time, energy, advice, whatever. They put effort into someone, and so they expect something back, which sounds like, that should be, most relationships should be somewhat of a give and take. Doesn't mean like you're keeping score or anything, or like, well, last time it was your turn and this time it should be this term, it should be, well, I don't know what should anything be, but kind of a little bit more relaxed and fluid, because there's going to be ups and downs to life and moods, and people go through changes, different times at different lengths, or they go through grief or anger and depression or happiness for shorter periods or longer periods, or depending on what's happening, it's different. It's not going to be perfect. And so Venus and Virgo people have to learn that whoever you choose or whoever you idealize as this perfect partner, is that they are going to have flaws. Maybe the flaws that are kind of hidden and they don't pop up until later. Maybe they're able to bamboozle you in the beginning, and seem so perfect, but then you start realizing once that kind of love dust kind of starts fading away, that they're not as perfect as, you thought they were. And then you might feel disappointed, but you did that to yourself. You put someone on a pedestal, or you wanted to change someone, to make them this trophy. But you can't. You can always help and advise, but that doesn't mean that you can actually change the person. The person has to want to change for themselves. And if they don't want to change because they just don't want to, or they're not going to do it because you told them that they should do it because you said so, you should still love them, I would think, and not be like, well, if you don't do this, or if you do that, that means you don't love me. It's like, no, that doesn't mean anything, you have to take the good with the bad, or, just accept that not everyone is going to kind of meet your needs. Hopefully they get back to you in some way, but don't expect people to become something that you want them to become. They have to already want that for themselves. So if you search for someone who already wants certain values or health activities or whatever, they're already on that track and path of wanting it, or they already value those things, and they've said or whatever done, they've already kind of acted on those behaviors and actions before you've even kind of mentioned anything. They didn't do it because you said anything. There's a better chance that, you're going to be more aligned if their values and wants and the actions that they're actually taking for themselves, it's already happening, and you're going to be a little bit better. As long as you don't kind of overdo it, because nobody wants to be ashamed to death or feel like you suck, you didn't do it right. Not like that. You didn't do it right. Don't do it like that. You didn't do it good enough, or I have to do it for you again, because you don't do it right. You always mess it up. Nobody really wants to stick around someone like that for too long. We kind of start teetering into like a narcissistic and empath, or someone who just has no self-respect for themselves to tolerate that. You might attract a partner like that, or you have to take a really good, deep look at yourself if you are that extreme, which that does not mean that you are. But if you notice anything like that, you have to kind of look deeper within yourself. I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, and see like, where in the world is this coming from? Because if you're projecting something like that onto someone else, it's actually like yourself. You feel like you are not good enough because you have unrealistic, perfectionistic desires or goals or whatever, that you feel like you are not meeting yourself. And so now you have to project it onto someone else because you might be frustrated or be like, you don't know how to kind of go over that next plateau for yourself, even though you're already good or you're already good enough. It really depends on who's analyzing what is good enough or not. But for yourself, you may feel like you set the bar so high for yourself that if you can't even meet it, and you feel disappointed or whatever, you might project that onto someone else. And so you have to be mindful if you do that, or you do that a little bit too much, then it's not going to be a pleasant relationship. You're going to start fights, or it's just going to fail. And then that trickles on onto other things. So always check your Chiron placement, your Saturn placement, and your North Node, South Node, because those are huge when looking into astrology. If you haven't explored those things already, especially your rising sign, because you are most like your actual rising sign and your South Node. And you're a mixture of everything, but those two depending on where your placements are and such, they may overpower this kind of Venus in Virgo, or you may have more lessons to where you are very critical, or you have like a stellium in Virgo in the 6th house or in the 7th house of relationships or something like that, or even 8th house of Scorpio. Scorpio is still kind of a relationship house. So just kind of be mindful of that if you are having any issues with that. That's just advice or helpful advice. I know Virgo always wants to be better and always wants to improve. So this kind of insight may help you depending on where you are on your journey, or how self-aware you are, or realizing patterns in your relationships if they are not kind of going the way that you're expecting, or maybe you need to just tweak your expectations a little bit and just focus on yourself. Have strong boundaries of like, what are you willing and not willing to tolerate in whatever category, what hierarchy are your values, what comes first, what are you kind of willing to kind of let go if the person doesn't put the toilet paper roll over instead of under, or under instead of over, whichever you prefer. Or if your partner doesn't like to make the bed, because if someone who makes the bed, and I forgot the military guy who made a speech that you should always make your bed in the morning. It is one positive thing that you have done for the day. It's like starting your day fresh, neat and clean, almost like the state of your room is the state of your mind, and Virgo is ruled by Mercury. It's a very thinking sign. Have to be very clean, kind of a neat freak, orderly, organized, not chaos and stuff everywhere, and like you can't find what you're trying to find, like the nail clippers are in the kitchen and things just are not where they belong. That is not a Virgo trait. That is like screaming, deep down inside, unless you have, a high tolerance of that, or you grew up in a family where it was already like that and you just had to suck it up and deal with it, because no matter what you did or how often you cleaned or how often you organized, it was destroyed like so fast. It's like my house. So, then, that person has a higher tolerance of just kind of letting it go and being like, yeah, whatever, you can't always have it your way, or you can't have, the perfection, your way. If the person that you're with or living with just simply does not do it, or they're not willing to do it, or they make mistakes, they're trying, but they still fall into their old habits, and that's going to piss you off, So you have to learn to let go and just kind of think of the bigger picture of what matters more. This person has good values, or a good person, very caring and loving and smart, or, very responsible, all these other things, depending on what your values are, that you care about someone else, that you can, override them, leaving some stuff out for a while, not putting it back. You're going to have to, take what you can get and just kind of let go of some of the other things that might, drive you a little bit bonkers, Ow! Nemo, that hurt. No, come here. Come say goodbye. Come say goodbye. Yeah. So that was my my criticisms and analysis of Venus and Virgo. You may attract a lot of people who are like doctors, or people who are in healthcare, very precision oriented, cares about health, because that field, you kind of have to be, and it's a good thing, because if people are like, oh, la, la, I don't know, like, I mix up the charts and, oh, those numbers were the other patient's numbers, not your numbers. Like, oh my God, you would be freaked out like crazy. So there is good to these things. Oh, Nemo. It just depends on where where it's organized in your life, or what kind of person are you interacting with, and such things like that. Kind of how you apply that criticism, I suppose. Maybe you should work with a bunch of Olympians and not the average Joe in the health industry. So this way, they're more likely to meet your needs, So that's just, my God. No, you do not bite toes. Oh my goodness. Hiya, hiya. Please like and subscribe. Okay, I'm back. This happened with my Venus and Saturn. No, not Venus. Virgo, Saturn and Virgo video, where y'all are the only ones where I come back and be like, no, I want to add this, or I want to add this again. And I did not do that with any other zodiac sign, but I don't know what it is. Maybe it is just happening on purpose, just to piss you off and annoy you, just to kind of teach you to kind of get over me not being perfect, or having my presentation perfect enough, or displayed enough perfectly to your liking. So you can see past that and just listen and hear whatever value that I'm giving, without this kind of visual thing that I'm presenting to you, because I am not always like this. So I was just taking a shower, and I was just like, just to add in there, just for more info, when you criticize a little too much, or you're like shaming, it's almost like the Eastern cultures where, it's like, if you see like Oriental, ancient Chinese, the empire, or whatever they call it. It's kind of like, well, you have brought shame to the family. You're not perfect enough, or ideal enough, or haven't met, our expectations as the parent, or the emperor, or whatever, that you have now brought shame to the family, or to the country, or to the warrior kung fu, whatever thing it is. And so when you kind of put shame onto someone, sometimes it is, perceived to be good, because the person is more willing and driven through almost like silent anger to prove that they are good enough. And it sometimes may motivate someone to prove that, like, I'll show you that I am good enough. I can do this. Like, you can't put me down, or whatever. But then on the flip side of that, someone can perform that, they are perfect, or they're trying, or whatever, and they have crazy mental health issues. Like, look at Japan, so polite, like highly educated people, very smart, very polite and respectful. Their cultural mannerisms are just like so great, but it's almost like everyone is supposed to kind of act and perform a certain role. Otherwise, it's going to look bad, or they're going to be shamed and criticized. Like, you shouldn't do that. Like, what's wrong with you? If there's too much pressure on, especially during the developmental period, if the parent is so harsh, like, you need to be good enough, you need to study more, and the kid is studying for like 12 hours a day because the intensity of their workload is just so high. The expectations and competition is so high that, they put so much stress and pressure on themselves, or the parents do that, either by criticizing, or just like as a group, even if it's silent, that their mental health is, at an all-time high risk for like suicide and things like that. So that's why there's this kind of polarity to how much is too much when you criticize or kind of pick out someone's flaws and things like that, because everyone is different. Some people can handle it, or depending how much you give, because sometimes a little bit's like, okay, you should be able to take constructive criticism because the person means well. But sometimes when it's said in a way that is kind of demeaning or put down, that is no longer coming from a loving place. That's coming from a place of like, you suck, and if you don't do this, you're going to embarrass me, the parent, or whoever the person is. And if you embarrass me, like, I can't even go outside with you because you're just such an embarrassment to me, and that is absolutely not loving at all. So there's a difference in how you express that. Oh, Nemo. Hiya. How you express your criticism. So just be mindful of that. And then I think that's it. Just watch me cut this and then paste another thingy or whatever. But, I just wanted to add, maybe this is just kind of pushing your buttons of tolerance of my presentation not being flawless. If it's going to be stuck on the internet forever, why wouldn't I just go the extra mile and just, make it like one of my projects that I would turn into school because I'm actually going to get graded on. I don't get paid for this. So either just take the info if it applies to you, or just don't. On a different day, if I feel like it, or I didn't come back from the gym, then I will look better because there's, more reason for that. So sorry if I'm too casual for you. But maybe that is to teach you on purpose, because you happen to be the only sign that this has happened 2 times in a row with. And I've never done that with, well, I don't know about never, but I have not done that with the other signs. So if you check out Virgo, Saturn, and Virgo, if you happen to have Saturn and Virgo, because you might not, and then you can see that I added on 1 or 2 times because I just came up with something else, and you're like, oh, this might be informative or might kind of give more in-depth perspective to kind of learning to not be so perfectionistic, because that is just not, no one's gonna be that perfect, and if they are, then they're, off camera when they take off their makeup and you're like, oh God. Then you'll be like, oh, you didn't seem like this from the outside, or you didn't present yourself from the year like this, so sometimes looking for relationships and stuff, one indicator is like, are you able to live with them? All the little nuances and annoying things that they do on a regular basis, is that going to drive you absolutely crazy? Or is it within the bandwidth of tolerance that you're able to do for a really, really long time? Otherwise, just be acquaintances or learn to accept that they're just not good at certain things, or they hate cleaning. And so are you willing to clean, or you have to hire a maid, or what are you willing to do? Or hopefully they're willing to put in the work as well. So yeah, that will now be the end of my video. So please check out my playlist, subscribe and like, and check out my book, link down below. Okay, bye. So